This topic is one where I feel like I'm speaking to the experts. If I have to talk something about social media, I would take help from the next generation. I'm not an expert on social media, but let me start by kind of a foolish question. Is there anybody in the audience now who is not on social media? Arey wah, there's one person. So no Twitter, no Facebook, no WhatsApp, no Instagram. Excellent. That's a great news. Why should we have a round of applause for somebody? I mean, I'm not joking. I'm really seriously impressed. That's very good. Ah, so the credit, let's say 50% should go to you and 50% to the Indian Army. Well, but still, in today's day and age, it's simply impossible not to be connected through social media. Is that not so? And not in a negative way. We are almost dependent on social media for so many activities now. Uh, and there is, I mean, we live in a connected world, and this used to be a cartoon until some time back, but it's no longer so. It's a fact of life today. Everything we do, during my rounds, I see some smart residents Googling an answer to a question. And until some time ago, it used to be annoying, no longer so. As I said, it has become a way of life. Being connected to the internet, either through internet per se or Google or through various other apps, whichever you may be using, we live in a connected world and we must use whatever convenience it provides to us, whatever services are available through the internet in a sane, controlled way, in a safe way, so that it doesn't harm us. So, whatever I'm going to talk about are some random thoughts. These are not sermons or guidelines or rules, except a few things which are like legal obligations on ourselves. And not just with an army man, these are obligations on every Indian citizen or perhaps any global citizen. There is a multitude of social media platforms which you can use. Perhaps you're using many of them, and there may be more, not, I mean, which are not in common use, but some of you may be using. And irrespective which platform we are talking of, there are certain kind of good things to remember or good dictums to remember to be responsible users, to be safe users of these social media platforms. Why do we doctors use social media? Of course, some things are listed here. Why don't we listen from the audience? Why do you use, any of you? Why do you use social media? Any of those social media platforms? Anyone? Oh, so you do not use social media at all? Come on, don't be a dumb audience. I want answers rather than just, I mean, I hope you have not come here to sleep. I would not let you do that. Sorry? Excellent. So entertainment, having fun is one important aspect to it. Great. What else? Connectivity to remain connected for communication, you mean? Excellent. You may be communicating with your professor or your colleague about a patient, so a professional need, or you may be connected to your mother, telling her, "Oh, I had my breakfast this morning," and she would be calm. What else? Good. So yes, until in my residency days, I would go to the library to learn about any new thing. Any literature search would have to be going to the library. But now it's all there on your phone, so you can remain connected. So there are number of users of social media. And education and professional practice is the prime thing that I'm going to talk about. Of course, all other things that you talked, having fun, having some entertainment, is equally important. but something which I'm going to discuss more is the education professional practice for sharing ideas and information, debating health issues, but we also use it for self promotion. When I say self promotion, it's not always a wrong or a wrong connotation which comes with self promotion. There are some reasons why you should promote yourself, your department, your institution, your organization, because you want to share that information with the rest of the world in a positive way. So that too is an is a reason, and you of course need to be connected with the rest of the world, be updated with current events, and last but not the least, to have some entertainment. But social media is a double-edged sword. Whatever you put out is captured there for posterity forever. Once you have written something, I mean, you tweeted something, you may not have been in the right frame of mind and you vented your anger, it is recorded forever. You may delete that tweet, but somewhere in their servers, it would still be there. So somebody can come back and buy those tweets can come back and bite you. So social media certainly is a double-edged sword, and one unfortunate part for us as professionals is that it has the potential to blur the professional and personal domains or merge the two. Let's, as responsible professionals, it is for us to ensure that we do not allow this as much as possible. There are a number of ethical issues that can arise if we use the social media unwisely or rather recklessly. So be careful whatever you send out, whatever you share on social media, and all these not so desirable instances can be avoided by using your simple common sense, not so common sense, and by following some guidances and rules. And those are things that I would like to use. I would like to talk about, and as I said, I would mostly focus on usage of social media for professional communication and to some extent on personal communication. Now, I said that there are certain rules which are obligatory, which we are all bound by. Some of them are put up by the government. I'm sure you can Google and you'll find any number of rules. But how many of you are aware that we are all government officers? Each one of you sitting here. None of you, oh, unless there's one odd person who's honorary, not being paid by the government of Uttar Pradesh, you're all, each one of you are a government officer and a class one officer. I do not know if this terminology is, I mean, it makes sense to you or not, but each one of you, of us, are bound by rules which are applicable to Government of India and Government of Uttar Pradesh officers. So these rules, they do apply on us. These are framework for guidelines, but to some extent, these are rules. There is a subtle difference between guidelines and rules. Rules are mandatory, obligatory. Guidelines are like guidance or some advisory that you are expected to follow. But it's best to not flout these. One further thing, whatever you may send out as a tweet, as a Facebook post, or a WhatsApp message, to the outside world, you would always be a doctor. You may have jokingly written something about a medical condition. You may have said that, oh, drinking milk prevents COVID. It will be taken as a medical advice, and it can actually be, you can be challenged with that advice, whatever casual things you may have written. So it becomes important for all medical professionals to be doubly careful while discussing an issue which is of medical nature. What you post online is ultimately seen as your own judgment. And often we hear that, oh, I simply forwarded somebody else's message. That's no defense to you. Uh, Whatever you may have forwarded, you are expected that you would have read it, you would have understood, not just on what is the what the message is on its face value, but what the implications can be, what their repercussions can be. And so be careful what you're forwarding. That's almost like what you're writing on your own. Anything that you post is never anonymous. You may think that, oh, I have not put my name at the bottom of the tweet. Well, your Twitter handle is unique, and it can be tracked back to you, or if it is on your Facebook page, it can be tracked back to you. So you are never anonymous. Anything posted online can definitely be tracked back to you. And as I said, if you post anything on a medical issue or blog about your day-to-day activities or experiences, then professional standards and ethical standards and everything which is applicable to a medical professional will apply. Compare this with whatever you may have posted relating your personal life or interest outside medicine. Perhaps it is of little lesser, I would say, complexity. But if it is even remotely medical in nature, you have to be very, very careful. Even when blogging in personal capacity or anonymously, you're still a doctor on the social media, as I said earlier, and you can't escape it. So, social media posts are your responsibilities forever. It's not that you can run away from those responsibilities. And so, you need to be mindful of the ethical repercussions, the moral repercussions, and the legal repercussions of whatever you have shared to the outside world. And it's expected of you by the regulators, for example, by the National Medical Council or MCI, that you adhere to these standards which are bounding on us or binding on us. I'm sorry. Uh, as professionals, we are all bound by certain rules, as well as there are some expectations from our peers and from the society. So, not just be mindful of the rules or legal obligations, but also what is expected of you from your peers. Respect the patients and colleagues. Do not be derogatory to them. Take a cautious approach to anything that you think could affect your professional standing. And mind you, any reckless utterance or a tweet or anything that you share, as I've been saying often or repetitively, it can come back and bite you. So be very careful in what you write and what you share. Now, in day-to-day life, in our wards, in our outpatients, wherever, even in theaters, operation theaters, or say a cardiac catheterization suite, wherever we may be surrounded by patients, patient confidentiality should be paramount. Think of if you were a patient, or your one of your family member was a patient, and a doctor who's treating that person in your family has not taken any due care to maintain the confidentiality, and then this fact goes out, or this information goes out, how would you feel? So patient confidentiality is not just a legal obligation, moral obligation, it's also a human obligation that we must always remember. Even in most casual posts or blogs, you may be sharing just a anecdote, some incidents from your day-to-day clinical experience. Think very carefully whether you need to get consent from the patient. If it is anything remotely related to a patient, if it is a child, from the legal guardian, if the patient is an adult in who can consent for herself or himself, you need to take a consent. Be particularly vigilant when discussing anything relating to individuals or specific medical cases, and these may not just be in one-to-one conversations. These may be casual, non-specific communications or communications as well. Even when we try to remove specific information relating an individual patient, it can yet be identified. A patient can be identified. For example, I write about, oh, mm, I had a patient who gave me a tough time in the operating room today. The patient bled many liters. I have not given any names, but I am identifiable. I have given a time and a date. I would be operating only one such major case at that time. And then the patient has bled liters of blood. That itself is identifiable, makes it identifiable. So do not consider anything very innocuous or harmless. Be very careful. Give due consideration to these facts. Uh, do not consider any patient naive or totally harmless. You never know which patient can haul you up in the court of law, and all these utterances on social media can be used against you. I'm not saying that we all need to be defensive how we practice medicine, but certainly we should be very careful how we share information on public media, especially while sharing pictures. If you have to take a clinical picture, think whether this picture is going to be of any use or not. They can be of use for your research, for documenting a patient's condition, for publications, for presentation in a scientific meeting. But think about that particular picture. Is this good enough to be shared, and would it bring any value? If not, do not take a picture. If you have to take a picture, you must take consent from the patient, at least a verbal consent, ideally an informed written consent from the patient. And certainly, even if you have not taken a written consent, if you have to share the picture, either in a print media or social media, you must have a written consent. And by the way, if the idea or the objective of taking clinical pictures was to publish them at some stage, almost no journal today would accept a clinical picture without a written informed consent of the patient. So do be mindful of this. Uh, Consider any clinical picture as identifiable. You may have taken picture of, say, a knee of a patient, but you can still that can still be still can be traced back to that particular patient. Again, if through indirect identifiers. So you may, whenever it is not essential, mask the face, mask any identification marks, including the name and the, say, the CR number or whatever identifiers that might be there. Even when you are taking a casual picture, say you're sitting on a desk, work desk, and there are people around, be mindful there may be patients or other people in the surrounding. Do not include, make sure they are not included in the frame, in the picture frame. Again, these can create problem later on with patient confidentiality. And then it's a good idea that whatever picture you have taken and you want to share, either on social media or in whichever way, ask one of your friends, a peer, to see if this is okay to share. If there's anything objectionable, even remotely objectionable, do not share it. I said earlier that social media has this potential of blurring professional and personal boundaries, and we must try and keep them separate as much as possible, especially when dealing with patients. Do not accept, I feel it's a good rule not to accept, say, a Facebook friend request from a patient. Of course, there can be exceptions. There can be patients who become friends or vice versa. They can be personal friends whom you have to treat. So I'm not saying that this is an absolute rule, but as much as possible, do not accept friend requests from from patients. There, I know of doctors who are very active on social media professionally. They use social media as a means or as a tool for professional propagation, and they have their own two different identities for the social media, one for personal usage with family and friends, and another for professional usage with patients and in so many different organizations. Maybe if you have those kind of ideas in mind, then it seems better to have two different identities or portfolios or logins, whatever you may like to call them. Of course, think multiple times before you share, uh, because social media is such an informal way of communication. We forget that there may be issues with sharing thoughts and so sharing uh, pictures or videos on social media, and those are the real potential pitfalls. And certainly, social media is not the place to let your steam off or speak your mind off, because, as I said earlier, all these thoughts, whatever you put out on the social media, can come back and bite you. And must not post when you are angry or drunk or emotional. Don't say or reveal anything on social media that you would not be happy to see in printed in a newspaper, because whatever you may have written there is there for posterity. Your right to free speech is not absolute. Whatever you put out on social media would be scrutinized. Defamation laws apply there, and you must avoid any unsubstantiated adverse comments for anyone, any individual or organization. Now, a few specific things about medical advice on social media. While I said earlier that whatever you may put out on social media would always be seen as a statement from a doctor, but if you are specifically addressing a medical issue, advising a person on her or his medical condition, be very cautious while doing so. So, you must do it as a doctor and identify yourself. Do not do it anonymously. Uh, why? Because we as doctors, either doctors in training or full-fledged doctors, we have a powerful voice in healthcare debates. And whatever words you put out will be seen as words of an expert with some experience, providing authoritative information to the lay public. Signposting the sources, or I'm saying so in whatever I'm saying because this is what has been recommended by WHO or ICMR, that kind of signposting, or or else answering general questions of fact is usually unlikely to lead you to some real problems. There would still be significant risk in providing personalized health advice through social media to members of public and should be avoided as much as possible. Always provide a conflict of interest if you have one, and disclaimer. For example, whatever you may have been shared, even say by email, by a patient or a patient family member, would still be limited information. So it would be a good idea to say that within the constraints of limited information available from you, the report shared by you, I can advise you this. And it would be a good idea to finish by saying that this online or social media advice is not a replacement for a face-to-face consultation and medical advice. There are certain regulations, rules which we are all bound by. For example, the National Medical Council or many hospitals or institutions, they provide very clear instructions for doctors not to use publicly accessible social media to discuss a patient's health condition, either with the patient themselves or anyone else. There are a number of exceptions, especially last year during the COVID pandemic or last 2 years. We have been told by the government that you can share medical information through social media, but again, there were certain riders which we were faced with. And today we are, it is acceptable to provide an electronically signed electronic prescription for patients to take to the to the chemist to get some drugs, but this is not a general rule. So finally, before you post anything online, I feel it's good idea to pass those thoughts through this 3 by 3 test. What is the 3 by 3 test? Think about the purpose of the thought that you're going to share on social media. Is it useful either to the society or to an organization or to yourself? Can it be hurtful or harmful to anyone? and would you like it to be done to yourself? And then put it against these three other thoughts: appropriateness, whether it is legally appropriate, ethically appropriate, and medically appropriate. And I'm even at the cost of being repetitive, I'm reminding you, whatever you share on social media would always be seen as an advice from a doctor. So if only if you think that none of these answers are on the wrong side, you should share that part on the social media. So it is indeed a connected word. It is giving us a lot of convenience, uh, a lot of things which were much more difficult to do, complex to do. We are finding them to be done very quickly, easily, but it has brought a need for a balance between the benefits and responsibilities. As a doctor, it's your job, it's your responsibility to always remember not to err in your judgment in terms of patient's confidentiality, uh, keeping in with the rules and regulations that you're supposed to follow, and the ethical standards that all we are all bound by. Thank you very much. So these are some thoughts. If there are any questions or comments.